Hello everybody, I'd like to welcome you. My name is Colin White, I'm from BI Research and today I am at the Northwest BI Summit in sunny Oregon. It gives me great pleasure to talk to Michael Whitehead from Warescape. He's the CEO and founder of Warescape. Welcome again.
And Colin, it's good to catch up. Last time was in New Zealand. Now
it was indeed, yeah.
It's in Oregon.
Yeah. So it's a great pleasure to talk to you as always. And of course, you know, the area you like to sort of talk about is Agile. And Agile always interests me from a BI and data warehousing viewpoint because, you know, a lot of people argue that Agile applies to IT in general. And so I suppose the first question I've got is there anything unique about BI and data warehousing from an Agile viewpoint that's different from applying Agile to IT in general?
Okay. Well, from a principle standpoint, they're the same. If you look at the Agile Manifesto and you look at what people are trying to achieve using Agile principles, it's very much the same thing. It's a lot of user interaction, it's a lot of very deliverable focused, very user focused. Where the difference comes in is with data. That, you know, as you're obviously aware, everything we do in the data space, we have existing data. We can't create data, we get it from somewhere. So when you're looking at Agile in a data warehousing in a BI space, you have to take account of the fact, or you should take account of the fact that you have data there already. So you can do some things that are a lot smarter because you have a solid base that you know is going to be there. And there's also some things you can't do. It's hard to refactor when you have large amounts of data. So there are differences, but there are a huge amount of advantages as well that the Agile community can certainly utilise within the BI space.
So let's drill down into a little bit more detail. Let's separate out BI and data warehousing. Let's look at BI first. I mean, a lot of people argue that Agile from a BI viewpoint is self-service. I mean, do you agree with that?
Well, I think if you're looking at it from consuming the data, I can see where that's relevant. But if you look at it from building and changing, where a lot of the Agile techniques are used, then no, I think it's quite separate. So if you're talking about Agile BI, I think of it as creating a layer that you can utilize to get results from your data warehouse system. And for me, I can't think of any better way to operate in that space than using Agile techniques, involving users, having a lot of contact with them, very short iterations, delivering something to people, making sure they're happy with it, making changes if necessary. For me, I think the practices of the Agile community are absolutely perfect for BI. And I don't think it needs to be, don't think it's just in self-service. I think it's in all BI, whether it's as simple as developing a report to creating a complex analytic. I would not approach it in any other way.
Okay, so self-service is more delivering the delivery vehicle, but you've got to provide a sort of data layer that people can access. So what Agile fits in is providing a data layer that people can understand and use.
Yeah, yes. And it changes with time, and that's one of the huge advantages of using Agile techniques is that you do take into account that it is going to change. You assume it's going to change from day one, so you build that in there, so you do things in small increments, you're checking with people the whole way through, you're making sure you're delivering value. You get that right, and your BI layer is going to be far more successful.
So from a data warehousing viewpoint, really it's a question of getting the right data in the data warehouse to satisfy this data layer for the BI tools.
Yeah, and it's a matter of choosing your battles really, because a data warehouse, especially an enterprise data warehouse, is going to be a big undertaking. It's going to be complex, there's going to be a lot of data. So the project is in total going to be, often quite long. So what we're trying to do in the Agile world is we're trying to break that down into sets of deliverables where we can deliver some value to people. They can actually start using it much sooner than with other techniques. But you still have to be very, very careful of delivering it properly and delivering to a plan. But you can get that value much sooner.
So would that apply to the enterprise data warehouse itself, in addition to perhaps views of the data we want, which could be virtual or physical data marts. It would apply to both areas.
Absolutely, and
Yes.
in our opinion, the techniques are valid for both of those layers. It's obviously easier when you're talking about the creating views or data marts, and that's simpler. But you still have to get that base data. That is still a hard problem, and you can still use agile techniques in there. In fact, should use agile techniques in our opinion.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting if we look at the kind of the waterfall, traditional waterfall model and the agile model. If I take my raw data and put it through both approaches, would I end up with a different result? Would the warehouse be the same?
It's a good question. A lot of people view, a lot of the criticisms of an agile approaches is that you'll end up with an undocumented warehouse. You're not sure where you're going to go. Mm-hmm. In actual fact, you should end up with exactly the same warehouse, regardless of the technique. Having no plan, having no documentation, that isn't agile. That's just bad practice. Mm-hmm. In our opinion, there should be no difference between the warehouse you get at the end of the day if you've taken a waterfall approach versus taking an agile approach. It should be something that adds value. It should have the data you need in it. It should be at the grain that you need. It should be well documented. You should have as little technical debt as is appropriate within there. It should be a fantastic warehouse. You should be proud of it, regardless of the technique.
But are these approaches mutually exclusive, or do people often use a combination of the two?
People often use a combination of the two. It's because it's not just the project world that you live in. You could have an agile project, but you may have an organisation that is not ready to adopt agile techniques totally. Maybe the governance structure isn't quite up to it. So there's a continuum. There's if you like, there's waterfall and doing everything properly, if you like, on one end, and at the other end there is agile and doing everything very, very fast. You have to pick that right level within that continuum. It's probably bad to be at one end, or it is bad to be at one end or the other. You pick where it's going to go. You're probably going to bring in some sort of waterfall techniques at some point. And I guess one of the things we look and do is try and move people further down that continuum towards the agile side.
Now, I do a lot of work on big data. I mean, do you see that changing things?
It's actually a really good question. I'd actually be interested in your opinion on it. As you said, I've heard you talk about the big data in a lot of cases. What do you think the impact's going to be?
I guess I feel people tend to focus on big data and the volume of the data. What I worry about more, what I think is more valuable, is to look at what we're going to do with the data. So it's the BI aspects or the analytic aspects of it. But I think given our move towards increasing data volumes, more data variety, multi-structured data, structured data, I actually think what we're going to end up with is what I would call governed data and ungoverned data. In other words, the governed data will go through what we've just been discussing, the agile process. You end up with a warehouse and you spin out the views and data marts. And I think people will be blending that with ungoverned data. And then I feel what will happen is that we need to monitor the way people blend the two kinds of data together. We need to capture the ungoverned data that's of value to us and then roll it back in to the warehouse. And so, well, I'm interested, do you agree with that? But presumably Agile would fit very well there as we start to blend in the new kinds of data that we learn about as we investigate. An agile model would work quite well rather than a waterfall model, right?
Look, I would think so. I think the only the thing I think as agile practitioners we have to get our head around is the volume aspect of it. And how does that work in, one of our ideas that we like is delivering value rapidly in short iterations. You get into some laws of physics problems with some very, very large amounts of data. So I think that's an interesting area which is going to develop.
But you may take the high volume stuff and just keep it as raw data, and then you take the subsets that you need and bring that into the agile
and
model.
Then absolutely we'll be doing that. And in my opinion, that would be the best way to do that, as you're when you're working with big data, often you're not sure about where the value
Yes.
is in it. So the idea of taking something and trying it out and working with users, working with people and seeing how that's going to work, that seems to me to be a natural fit.
Yeah, in fact, I often think of the investigation part of big data being ahead of warehouse design, and you use investigation to find out which bits of data are valued to you,
Yeah.
and then bring that across, even though you're keeping all the raw data somewhere else. But if you look sort of Warescape, then there are a lot of people in this space. What do you feel Warescape brings to the picture here?
We think that as a software vendor, what we want to do is enable people who want to do agile projects, give them the tool sets and really support their thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at that at a basic level, documentation often comes up in agile projects.
Yeah, people often feel there isn't any, right?
So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and agile people feel there's too much of an emphasis on documentation and up front in a waterfall project. So from a Warescape perspective, we generate the documentation at the end of the project, well actually on demand. So our idea is that documentation, yes, it's a pain, but also it's absolutely necessary.
And this is back to your thing. You still end up with the same thing.
You still end
Yeah.
up with a fantastic warehouse you're proud of, well documented, but the documentation for us it always should be available. It always should be up to date. So that kind of thinking is the sort of stuff that we put into our products. If you look at our other product, Warescape 3D, one of the things we do in there is we take a data model, check it against the source system and populate it with data before you've done the ETL, before you've done the data integration, so that you can have your front-end tool vendors, front-end tool people starting working on developing reports.
So you can build prototypes and proof of concepts.
Yeah, and you can really have you can involve them earlier into the project. You can start compressing the timeframes, and it's that sort of thinking that you get on an agile project. Of there's a bit of pressure on people often, and how can I deliver this stuff faster? How can I deliver something quicker? Is that what you want? We try and have products that support that kind of thinking. So that's what we're doing from the Warescape perspective.
Great. Well, we could talk all afternoon, but we've covered some good ground here, so thank you for talking to me. It's nice to talk to you as always, Michael.
Thank you, and it's good to catch up again.
Okay, so it's Colin White at the Northwest BI Summit. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it useful.